that is, what do you think about death? um,
Vodka, man, you just you love it too much. Get this man a podcast.
so who do you pass it first, Juan?
Well, I will answer and then pass it. Um, yeah, I think that we are sometimes very scared of death. And when we talk about death as a taboo, we like ba- value too much the individuality that we all have, and like when we understand more death as something natural and that is part of our cycle, like like we can be more connected with not only my own individuality but the world. But that's also like very hard because the only thing that we really have is like our life. So yeah, for me it's interesting, and I think it should be more normalized to talk about it, and also about the beliefs systems of like, is it there's life after death, or like, do you think it's just this? And yeah, it's just interesting to talk more about death, and I think we shouldn't be so much scared and not talk about it as a taboo. I will pass to Livy.
Yeah, it's interesting that I read that book when I was 15 and it really changed my life. Like it's a very yeah, it's a very interesting book, especially when it talks about that, about like how old people, for example, when they are approaching death, like that what they want the most is talking about death, and that people around them are always trying to avoid this talk as if it's something that they don't want to talk about or that is too fragile. But imagine when you're about to die, you're probably like so scared that, yeah, so beautiful, that all you want is yeah, some more context about it. And I think it just brings like these big questions that in the day by day we kind of avoid them, of like, why are we here, what are we doing, what did I do with my life, did I like have like a fulfilling path and purpose. And maybe if we talk about this more often, we might like connect more with our purpose. And I don't know, I think talking about death always brings a lot of life to, I don't know, the awareness of life and how like fragile life can be. And I pass to so for everyone that just joined, Juanca has an intro question of what do you think about death? We're kind of thinking about like a minute each because this is a topic that can go forever, but just to have a little taste. And I'll pass to Manu.
Thanks, Lady. Wow, what a great question. I think what you do in life echoes in eternity. Honestly, I think about it a lot. It really informs a lot of the things I do. But I mean, like the song says, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die, right? So I think it's a great transition. I'm curious to see what's out there when the time comes. I definitely do not want to live to very old age. I just want to live intensely and just punch my ticket like at, I don't know, not that late. But I mean, talking about the great gig in the sky, it's Pink Floyd stuff right there. And yeah, it's just very interesting. I'm excited to see what comes after, and because I'm really interested in dreams too, and dreams is like the small death. So yeah, it's just a very interesting topic. I could talk about it for hours. I'll pass it to Santi.
He was like, nope, not gonna do this.
Okay, I'll pass it to Mitch.
No, he's back. He's back.
Okay, Santi.
Yeah. I'm on the cell phone and I just was trying to manage. Well, death is something that I really don't think of. Actually, I had a tooth taken yesterday, and that's what bothers me today. So, but no, it just comes to my mind when someone dies and I have to go to the funeral. That's the only time when I sometimes think a little bit about it, but usually I don't. I don't think about it. I don't fear it either, but it's something I just do not pay attention to. I had a very sad experience. We lost our second kid when a few years ago, and that was probably the closest I was to death. But no, I don't really think about it. I don't pay attention to it. So that's all I can say. And I'll pass it to Dan.
Oh man. I think can you guys hear me? I think I had a good relationship with that. We're friends and stuff. I mean, like, I take it very kind of chill in a sense. I had almost killed myself the last time I drove a car like 20 years ago, like because actually a girlfriend just died, so it was kind of like some very intense years. So I come to terms with thinking about that, like I don't know, not really afraid of it, not really necessarily looking for it or anything. I always kind of like put myself in over time, put myself in situations that maybe other people won't put themselves into. Had like good tolerance to it, no allergies towards that. She's fine. She's a good mistress. And I don't know. Even so, I see it as a kind of like just the great shield, just like a moment of peace and going back into source. And I had this idea about like not necessarily dying ever. And I sense that as a kind of closure that's needed for all living beings. So the idea of immortality or whatever in whatever sense that may be is something that really very much interests me as technology advances and whatnot. So how we are going to approach that in 50 years, 100 years from now is something I think a lot about. But on a, I don't know, cyberpunk kind of approach. I'll pass it to Nate.
Well, I kind of feel like Santi. I never think about death. I perpetually kick that can down the road all the time, and I don't have a problem with it. I understand that there's probably a lot of untapped value with having a good relationship with thinking about death, but yeah, not for me. I I prefer to just ignore it, and hopefully it happens unexpectedly, and I don't see it coming. So. Yeah, I just don't have a great relationship with it, and I prefer it that way. So I'll pass it to Mayfair.
Well, for me, that is the only thing I believe we don't know. Um, what is going on after it happens? I mean, after. So, as a anxious person, someone who deals with anxiety, something that I have learned is that you can only work on what you have and what you know. And what I know is life. And it's the only thing that gives me expectations. And at least if there's something I don't know, I can work on it. But death is the other way around. So I try to live around something that a teacher said in high school, that it was that you all have to live to leave a footprint, and you better have a good and cute footprint, because all we have to do is celebrate that and do not think about sorrow and sadness. So yeah, death is unknown, and that's all I have to know. I'll pass it to Mitch.
Thanks. That's a really big question, and I think I have to echo what Nate and Santi said, where it's not really something I think about a lot. I think when I do think about it, it does scare me, and I think maybe part of it is just the unknown aspect of it. And I think as you get older, maybe you become more familiar and at ease with it in general, just at ease of not knowing what's on the other side, I guess. And until then, it's kind of like, well, why, stress yourself out trying to figure out something that you'll like, there's no way to know. So focus on the present, I guess. That's kind of a cliche answer, but that's my answer. I'll give it to Chewy.
To the question Juan proposed is, what do you think about death?
I'm sorry, what was that again, Libby?
What do you think about death?
What do I think? I'm sorry about the topic.
About death, dying.
Oh, death. Sorry, I thought you said that. About death, I like the cultures that like to see it as like a reincarnation process. I know that there's a lot of people that don't really like think with this, but I've always like also the idea of energy, how energy flows. So I feel that in a way that's like our chance to always like come back and be able to try it again or make it better. So like now that Mitch brought up like fear, I feel that like living in this way can help you like overcome the fear of trying different stuff, because if you can always like try and learn something from it, I feel that is valuable, and death plays like a very specific role there, because most people associate it with like stop, right? Like with like a sudden like stop of trying things, of living. And yeah, well, I like to like not being afraid of relating that with keep trying. I'll pass it back to you, Libby, because I don't know who already went.
Thanks. I'll pass to you, Inesi.
Yeah, well, I think that thinking about that allow us to remember what's really important to us and live intentionally. I mean, for example, I lost my dad in like past year, so it was a very interesting way of learning how meaningful are our actions while we are living it, and thinking about that bring us closer to what we believe, what is worthy, and we can ask ourselves what are our values and what we stand for. So I think that it is a positive way of seeing it, because nowadays we have like that taboo, or we believe that death is only to feel it like in a sad way, but there are some things that we can take advantage of this kind of thoughts like that, like reminds us to appreciate the present and be mindful. So I don't know who else is missing there, but I pass to you again, Vivian.
Thank you. Pass to Zapti.
Yeah, thanks, Libby. Yeah, I normally scientific, so I do not believe like after death or stuff like that. But what is really awesome is like Jeff Bezos plan to stop aging and growth. So I also think like getting old as a disease, like it's not like normally when you get old you get a lot of disease, and for the way I see it and a lot of scientifics too, it's like these are the symptoms and the disease is actually aging, right? And yeah, I love like Jeff Bezos is putting a lot of money there to develop, and yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I think yeah, let's avoid it if we can. I don't know. Yeah, back to you, Libby.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everyone. Sorry if this brought painful memories or vulnerable talks. I think is somehow beautiful that we can speak about this in a friends group like we are. And yeah, thank you all for joining today, and we can move on to our agenda. So I put only 2 topics here because I think they will, let me share my screen. I think they will take enough space, but also if anyone wants to propose other topics or things that need to come to our attention, feel free to write in the agenda that it's in the Softgov chat. So I wanted to go through this decision-making guide with everyone just to hear thoughts and see if there's anything missing here. Jeff gave a good feedback. In general, I need to integrate all the feedbacks to the proposals I posted, but just wanted to go through this because I think there was some confusion, especially with the last proposals of like, how do we go about this? What is the process? And something that I was talking about with Tim is that it would be good to have a visual for this. So now it is just in this like kind of guide format, but maybe we can have a map of like, oh, if you need a decision, what are the questions that you ask yourself? And then from there, where do you go? What arrows to follow? So yeah, maybe this one I'll expand a little bit because it's something that we didn't have, and I just thought it was lacking to have some type of like a formal understanding that we can make decisions inside of the working groups. So some of the decisions that we have are very like specialized in one working group, are very like contained within that working group. So the processes that happen and emerge there for a decision to be made can be very free by someone that proposes something in the working group, and to have a little bit of a consensus check. And then there is this term, quality consent, that this writer expanded in this paper, Consent and Political Legitimacy. But it's quite like it's a little bit dense to read it all, but it's very nice, like to have a political and also blockchain perspective of governance and the types of consent that different mechanisms use, not only in decentralized governance, but also in the traditional governance. And then she talks about this quality consent as like, we don't need everyone to agree, but we need opinions should be given with space for everyone to think about it, to discuss it, and it needs to be good for everyone in the sense that it's not harmful. So it's very subjective to say what is good or not, but then there's a base layer of something not being harmful as like as something that we can agree on easily, and then build up the quality of the consent on top of that. And this is all kind of like a lot of theoretical stuff on top of something that can be very simple in practice. That is like mostly what we do already, like having this calls and meetings where everyone is present and is able to voice their opinions. And then if there is no blocking for anything to happen, once everyone has an understanding about an idea, then that can be moved on within a working group. So that's why I just added this part here. Is there any comments, questions about this, or we can move on to the next ones?
So I just wanted to add that I think it would be really beneficial to have kind of more of a practical guide centered around the technology that we do use. You know, understanding the differences between like formal and informal voting. Like if you're making a decision within comms, maybe Chewy wants to implement something, doesn't really understand what the impact might be within the community, but acknowledges that there might be an issue. You know, how does he go about finding that signaling? You know, if he goes through Snapshot, do people understand that we use Snapshot for both formal decision making and informal decision making? What type of voting method he should use for getting the right type of signal to inform his decision, whether he should be executing it or not. These types of things come to mind when I think about our advice process in general. You know, because there's a lot of decisions that you might make that you don't realize may have an impact with other working groups or with the community as a whole. And having an easy way for you to just say, hey, I want to, this is my intention. If anybody has anything to say, I want that there to be a vehicle for me to be like, hey, what about this? Oh, you didn't think about that? Okay, then let's reevaluate. And rather than just going through individual channels, we open it up to the entire community to engage with it, and creating vehicles for that, and making sure that we as individuals, as stewards of a working group, know how to use it, and making sure that we're using this process correctly.
Yeah, we'll get there. I mean, this is just the first topic of something that is relatively simple and localized. So that's why there is like use cases here, local decisions, but this can be more specific. And if anyone thinks of examples, it can be good to add it too. But I just wanted to formalize something that already happens and give kind of a name to it. And then this creates an understanding for other people that are joining that it is possible to make local decisions in the local environment, and that if these decisions won't affect the whole community, then you don't need the whole community input. Or if we see that there is if some decisions need to be taken for a bigger decision to exist, then that this process can happen kind of frictionless too. And then if people, so the idea of sharing something in a working group, it's also that what you were saying, like to use the example of maybe Chewy wanted to implement something in comms, but then he brings it to the comms working group, and maybe he couldn't see that this would affect a larger amount of people, and he thought that that decision could be taken just in that call. But then someone raises the point of like, no, I actually think this decision will affect more people and maybe it should be posted like in the forum for advice process. And that's why it would be cool, the map that I was talking, that Tam was suggesting, because I think having this visual will help everyone to like navigate between the possible types of decisions. And we don't want it to be super complex. It's the more intuitive, the better. And I think we naturally have these intuitions about like some decisions, you know, like we need something and then we ask someone's opinion. And then if things are sound, like we have some level of, how do you call this? Of like a general understanding, I don't know, of a group awareness. And then it's also based on trust that that group is like coherent about the decisions. And then this trust we build in the culture and many other practices that we have been building like together. Does that address what you said, Nate?
Yeah, it does. I would just say that, you know, education is a huge part of that, and knowing how to go through that. So I think a visual is really important, and then just having practical understanding of different voting methods and making sure that the people who are making decisions, you know, can utilize all the tools at their disposal in a responsible and effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was working with Jess today too, because she wrote a polycentric governance article. But we got to the conclusion that it's almost like a glossary of tools, practices, and mechanisms. So it's like an in-depth explanation of what each thing consists of. So if someone needs more depth understanding, it's also available there. And the education part, I think it's very fundamental to us as a community. I think the TEC really like lifts that flag, and I think the way education works best is like chatting, is person to person interaction, but then also having documentation to support it.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, there is my recommendations on using quadratic voting, and I was also chatting with you, Libby. I think quadratic voting won't be any useful in the future. Like when we have, like, quadratic voting is cool when we have a curated list of all the members, but when, you know, when after the hatch anyone can buy into the bonding curve, or even a hatcher can just send money to another address and keep voting, and yeah, who do not do that will have less voting power than someone that does that. So yeah, quadratic voting doesn't make much sense after we don't have a curated list of all the members.
Okay, maybe I'll just go through all of these types, and then we see if what is here, if there is something that is not addressed yet, and then we can discuss it. But yeah, I hear you, Zach. We'll talk more about it in Snapshot. So then advice process, I think, well, this working group thing could also be considered some type of advice process, but more localized. So I think another name was just good to separate things. And then I'm calling advice process whenever something goes to the forum. And then I separated into two types of use cases. One of financial proposals that will be submitted to conviction voting. So this is optional. Like, we can't control if people are posting something to advice process, or maybe they have something that it's very thought out already, or they had advice process from other people that might not be like immediately connected to our community, and they could post straight to the conviction voting session of the forum. But then this is just a use case that if people want to submit for advice process before submitting to conviction voting, they can, to just have a better sense of like how their proposal is sound for the community, because it will end up being voted anyways. And then the second process is cultural agreements and practices. So then here, I think here there's a little bit of discernment from everyone, and this is not so set in stone. So I know it might be like challenging for like having this subjective discernment of like, maybe you have a cultural agreement or a practice that you want to implement or to change, and you want to and you post to advice process, and then you receive a lot of engagement and feedback, and then you incorporate that feedback, and there's nothing blocking that. There's no negative feedback. There's nothing, like there's only constructive things that are elaborated into a possible solution. I think whenever that happens, this should be enough. And that's why advice process was created in the first place, was to give autonomy for individuals in flat organizations. So it's like, oh, if I have an idea, a proposal, a solution, I want to implement that. I just want to hear if this is coherent with the whole, but if it is, I have the green light to move forward. And I think it's important for us to keep that aspect of advice process to not always be like a step to another proposal. So when it would be a step to another proposal, one, if there is like something blocking it, like if there is a very like negative feedback, or if the feedback received doesn't sound like that it can be incorporated, or if someone else is suggesting something that you don't agree, if opinions start to become polarized, if the advice process presents some type of tricky situation where you see like, oh, maybe this needs to be brought to a wider attention, or it needs to be dropped completely, then either it can be dropped, or it can be restructured, or it can be proposed to the whole community and have more promotion around it. But I think it's cool that advice process, like, it's this open path maker instead of like one more process into something. Or when like how we are doing now, there was a lot of proposals that were fuzzy. So even though they need to be posted in other places, we needed to have this like collective intelligence to shape them. So then when it's like this, I think it's useful to have it too. And then snapshot use cases, cultural agreements and practices. When it will affect a large majority of stakeholders, so we can have recommended uses. And I think here then it comes what you were saying, Zaptimus, and we can have more discussions about this. I only put like something very like, I didn't put so much thought into this. So we should actually look into all of the voting mechanisms that we can use and have like which ones are recommended, which ones are not, like we're going to do in the session. And then use cases of snapshot, also when something needs a clear yes or no decision. So that's really hard to get with advice process. So having like a yes or no, it's a very easy way to understand that needs to be voted on. And then community signal for on-chain proposals that might be like, for example, what is happening with buying in the bonding curve proposal. Like we have multiple avenues for how to execute the same proposal. And then for that, we might need some signaling. And the signaling can be like ranked choice voting, or other types of signaling for what route to take. So this would be also another way of using a snapshot instead of using only advice process. And then runoff votes of crowd proposal making. I'll get into crowd proposal making on token log, but for example, the runoffs that we were doing on token log, I think they would go better on snapshot because it's more intuitive for that second part of the vote when we already have less options. And then finally, token log. I didn't put conviction voting and tau voting here yet, but I'll add later. But I felt like this one's first because they were more confusing. And then token log use cases. So something like we've been using for deciding parameters. So we used for the hatch DAO parameters, and now we're going to use for the commons upgrade. So it's something that is built into the dashboard. So because token log uses GitHub and GitHub offers this modularity of being able to connect multiple things and then get a vote straight out of there, then it's really great to use token log, and we don't need to use snapshot for that because it would be harder to connect everything in the backend. And then the last thing is crowd proposal making. So when we need kind of like a brainstorming of proposals, like we had in most of the cases that we use token log for. So when a lot of people are encouraged to submit a lot of proposals, and then we need kind of a filtering through that. And for that, token log works great because we can open these proposals on GitHub, is easy to make. And then after that, the runoff could happen on token log because that would be the more intuitive part. Since we can program like the beginning and the end of the vote, and on token log, it happened that people added proposals after some time, and then that got confusing. So to avoid that, we can pass the runoff to token log. So that was some of the patterns I thought, and this will definitely be easier in a visual form, but I just wanted to hear if there's any other questions, feedback about it, and yeah.
I think like this is amazing, Levi. Like this bring a lot of transparency on our processes, and yeah, I mean there are details we will still working on, but I think overall this was super needed that Solsista was raising it long time ago, and yeah, thank you so much for taking that on.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the what you said about the quadratic voting, things like that are super important for us to look at on like what types of voting should we promote or not, and how to help people to make that decision and be like educated about it. Because like what you brought up of the collusion attacks, I wasn't even thinking about it and how that could harm some of our processes. So I think that is really cool to have like the collective intelligence bringing up issues. Should we move forward to the next topic then?
I had one question. Maybe it's not the time for it just now, but well, and one comment. Like basically, the main thing that brings me here is, and I've been participating more in the TC after the hatch, is thinking about the trusted seed, and like the trusted seed and the hatches from the trusted seed, and how do we want to get them to participate. I feel kind of responsible from Commons Stack side in that sense. So communicating to them and whatnot, that's a big deal. I very much in love with what you just presented, Libby. I'm very curious about if there's already maybe in your mind or something that's brewing and will be case by case maybe, but trying to something I'm very curious about is basically understanding the let's say the target participation goal that we want to in any of these cases of voting and decision making processes like are we aiming for 50% of the people that hatch? Are we aiming for XXX? What are the kind of targets in that sense? The kind of participation we want to get from these people in general. Yeah, that's at the top of my mind right now. It doesn't have to be answered right now, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a very scary topic. I'm glad you brought up because we need to figure it out at some point, and we need to decide how to decide about that. Like, what are kind of the parameters for token log voting, for example, or for a snapshot? Like, how much participation is needed for a proposal to be approved? Or I like the position Griff has about this, that is, we shouldn't require a minimum of participation, but we should have a strict rule for when something is blocked. So we kind of assume that things are going well until they are blocked. And then what we had initially for the first votings was 15% of negative of a block is enough to block something. So that's like, yeah, that would mean like 85% approval, but not necessarily like needing to have 85% of the community agreeing with something, but just needing to have 15% disagreeing. And then that would need to be reformulated. But we should discuss that more for sure.
That's super interesting, and also interested in, for example, like a more targeted approach to kind of like funnel people into specific working groups for a specific decision making that doesn't have to go to the core or to the whole of the community, but say like people that are mainly have expertise in communications or interest in how we communicate, maybe funnel that way, so we don't necessarily have to have everybody all across the board in all of the senses. I'm just thinking because of the data that we have from Commons Stack side, that of course we were not able to pass on to the TC, but there are things that there's a bunch of people with different interests and different expertise, and that can certainly be, I don't know, it could be so useful if properly managed. So yeah, I don't know, like thinking about the scale and the scaling as well, and kind of like specific funnels. I'm just rambling, so I'm gonna pass it back to you. But yeah, this is top of mind for me. I'm happy to engage in any way. And also with comms, I haven't been able to jump into Chewy's calls and FOMOing about it.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, drop all your ideas in the chat and we can all like jump into it. So maybe we should move. We only have like 13 minutes left, and we could have a quick update on the status of each one of the proposals. So maybe starting with the 75% governance rights, because last we had talked that it would be submitted to the Hatch DAO tomorrow. Is that still the case, Juanca?
Well, I have been a little bit off these days because I was traveling and I am retaking. The last gravity call, I couldn't assist, and I will have to sync maybe with Griff or to know what did the community talked about it, but on like the way that I was thinking on doing it was via a snapshot vote, and only asking the community if they support the 75% governance give back, yes or no, because what I was talking with the Common Swarm team is that the the vote shouldn't be blocked by a decision that that can be and is on the terrain of the Common Swarm, and that the decision that they take is the decision from the experts, and also that that decision then is going to have another advice process more public. So like not blocking the vote for that technical aspect and going forward with it. So yeah, I think that the 75% governance giveback is going good. We haven't had any signaling from the community on the vote. So yeah, I think that maybe we can have it this starting this Friday. But yeah, I for sure need to think on the things that maybe I missed that were the latest discussion.
Tam, did you want to add anything about this, about what we talked earlier?
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I think the question that we sort of batted around was, does this need to be a decision to the hatch DAO or Snapchat? Snapchat, what am I talking about? Snapshot. And I thought, trying to follow this decision tree, and it's not fully mapped out. I know I submitted a draft in one of the issues, but something like, and I just maybe want to raise a question with Juan Carlos too. I know we did talk about this being the kind of decision that we could put on Snapshot, but then if we're using the criteria for deciding between Snapshot and the hatch DAO, and one of the criteria is if it will affect, like, one, does it request funding from the hatch DAO, or two, does it require code change? Then it probably means that this would have to be a decision for the hatch DAO, because it may require, depending on the solution, changes to the augmented bonding curve smart contracts. So I guess that was sort of one thing that came up out of a discussion that we had earlier, where it's probably likely that the solution would require something fundamental to the hatch DAO, in which case it should probably be a vote on hatch DAO. I'd love to hear, Juan Carlos, what you think about that, or anybody else.
Yeah, I think if we're going to go with that criteria, yeah, but then the only thing that I would suggest is to post this in the forum, because yeah, that's like the place where we like are having this advice process. And actually, yeah, the last post that I did was to propose that this idea that I just said, and to have some advice process, and yeah, it's perfect. So yeah, if you think that it's better to be a DAO vote, I don't have any problem with it. The only thing that I see is that I don't want to like take too long on this vote, because as I understand, the implementation of the technical solution is also going to take some time, and yeah, they want to be sure that the community is going to be able to welcome that amount of work before doing it, and maybe having like a negative support from the community.
Great idea, Juan Carlos. I'll post it right now.
Thank you.
Then just because we talked also in comms about the reward systems, I just wanted to give a quick update and say that we'll have a call tomorrow. No, Thursday at 4 p.m. Europe time. and anyone is welcome to join, is going to be in the community hall. So I've been working with Christopher. He joined us as a product owner for the reward systems, and he's doing really amazing work mapping it out, what we're going to do. So we're putting together a team that's going to work with us on it, and this is what we have. This is what we have so far. So the idea is to have a full working product for praise. And so we have a few options of like a very simple change, do as little as possible because we just want something to move forward with. And then add some product that would still require a little bit of like spreadsheet management and stuff that would be more manual. And then the ideal solution is to have a product that cover our full range of needs. So this product would be the praise system having a dashboard to itself and storing all of the data. And then we could have layers of data that is of all the other reward systems that we're using, and that could all be managed by the same dashboard. So we would have Praise, SourceCred, and Alexandra all plugged in there, and that would even give the space and capability for us to adding other reward systems in the future if we want. Yeah, so we have this map here, and we'll have a call tomorrow to explain more in depth where we're at and how we're going to start doing things and building a timeline for it. Does anybody has questions about this? And I don't know, Chewy, Nate, if you guys were thinking of something specific.
I'm super bummed you've just told me about this meeting that I'd like to attend, and I had just scheduled a meeting at that time. Exactly. I just also wondered, I think I saw you talk about the Alfie Kohn book, if that had any, if looking at that had any impact on your thinking in terms of how this works.
Yeah, that book is so interesting. Thanks for the recommendation. So we're looking more into like the conceptual part of it and the governance and then the reward systems research group that we're going to start there. And then for here, we need kind of like a solution ASAP. So we are leaving a little bit of the conceptual diggings aside for now until we have something to move forward.
I see. Okay, thanks.
But we'll get there, and I'll keep you in the loop.
This meeting's on the TEC calendar?
Yeah. Can you see it? Tomorrow.
I see voting strategies.
Reward. It's a Thursday. Sorry, not tomorrow.
Oh, Thursday. Okay. Anyway, I'll follow up with you.
Okay, cool. Three minutes left. I know we have a debate after this call about agave. Do you want to intro that, Mitch, and what we're going to be talking about there?
Sure. I mean, if you guys have been following on, well, we had a call with Agave, some people from Agave, I should say, on the 6th of September. I put up 3 different proposals of things we can do. We can do all of them. We can do one of them. We can do some of them. There's been lots of really good discussion happening on there. And yeah.